What would you do if you witnessed something terrible happening right in front of you? Would you stand up and take action or turn away? In a crowded cafe, a boy's courage is about to expose a dark secret, and one woman's world will come crashing down. When a life is at stake, who will speak up? As the tension rises and the truth unfolds, this is not just a story about one man's fight for justice. It's about the untold strength of the overlooked and the power of standing up when it matters most. The stakes are higher than you think. Will you dare to watch what happens next? Before we dive deeper into this gripping story, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, Epic Story Moments, yet now is the perfect time. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update and be the first to hear our incredible new stories. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support more heartwarming tales like this. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. The Park Cafe, a sanctuary of elegance nestled in the heart of the city, exuded an air of exclusivity. Framed by lush trees and the gentle murmur of a nearby fountain, the cafe attracted the elite like moths to a flame. The clinking of glasses, soft laughter, and the hum of casual conversations filled the midday air as waiters in crisp uniforms moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays of exquisite cuisine. The aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the faint sweetness of blooming flowers, creating an atmosphere of serene luxury. At a prime table in the center of the cafe sat Bernard Green, a name that resonated with power and success. At 72, Bernard was the epitome of affluence. His meticulously tailored suit, gold-rimmed glasses, and confident demeanor told the story of a man who had conquered his world. Opposite him sat Marissa, his much younger wife, a vision of perfection with jet black hair cascading over her shoulders and a face that seemed sculpted for magazine covers. Her crimson lips curled into a polite smile, but her eyes betrayed a detachment as she scrolled through her phone, paying little attention to her husband. Beyond the wrought iron patio fence, a boy named Malik watched the scene unfold. He was small for his age, his oversized hoodie and worn sneakers a stark contrast to the cafe's opulence. His sharp, dark eyes darted between the tables, scanning for an opportunity. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, a relentless reminder of the stark divide between his world and the one before him. Malik was a fixture on these streets, a shadow at the edge of concern for those who frequented the cafe. Inside, Bernard adjusted his glasses and glanced at his watch, his tone edged with irritation. "You're distracted again, Marissa." She looked up with a practiced smile, placing a perfectly manicured hand over his. "I'm right here, darling," she replied, her tone as polished as her appearance. Yet, even in her reassurance, her gaze flickered back to her phone. Malik's stomach growled audibly, pulling his attention to Bernard's table. A pristine bowl of soup sat steaming before the man, accompanied by a basket of warm bread and a sparkling glass of water. The meal was a distant dream for Malik, who hadn't seen such food in months. His mouth watered, but as he inched closer, something caught his eye. Marissa's hand moved with calculated precision. From her designer handbag, she retrieved a small vial, its glass glinting in the sunlight. With a casual flick, she unscrewed the cap and tilted the vial over Bernard's soup. A thin stream of clear liquid disappeared into the bowl, blending seamlessly with the broth. Her movements were fluid, her expression serene, as though she had done nothing more than stir her drink. Leaning forward, she whispered to Bernard, her tone soft yet chilling. "After everything I've done, you won't ruin this for me now." Malik's breath hitched. His heart pounded as he crouched behind the railing, his mind racing to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Could this immaculate woman, sitting in such a refined setting, truly be capable of something so sinister? The unease in her voice, the deliberate act, everything screamed danger. Malik's instincts urged him to walk away. This wasn't his fight. Who would believe a boy like him anyway? But as he watched Bernard lift his spoon, the soup nearing his lips, Malik felt a surge of urgency. His fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. Right and wrong collided in his mind, but one thought pushed through the chaos. If he didn't act, no one else would. Summoning every ounce of courage, Malik stepped forward. His voice cracked, but it rang out clear and loud, cutting through the cafe's hum. "Don't eat that." The cafe fell silent. All eyes turned to the boy, their expressions a mix of shock and curiosity. Bernard froze mid-motion, his spoon suspended inches from his mouth. He turned to Malik, his brow furrowing in confusion. Marissa's head snapped around, her composed demeanor shattering into sharp edges. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice cold and clipped. Malik's chest heaved, but he stood his ground. "She put something in your soup," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I saw her do it." A ripple of gasps spread through the cafe as patrons exchanged uneasy glances. Bernard set his spoon down, his sharp gaze shifting to Marissa. "What is he talking about?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with suspicion. Marissa's reaction was swift and fierce. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her tone laced with venom. "He's lying. Just some street kid trying to cause trouble." But Malik didn't waver. "I saw you," he insisted, his voice rising with conviction. "You poured something into his soup when he wasn't looking." The weight of the boy's words hung in the air. Bernard's expression hardened as he reached for the bowl, raising it to his nose. He sniffed the contents, his face darkening as he caught an unfamiliar chemical scent. He looked up, his eyes boring into Marissa's. "Marissa," he said quietly, his tone dangerously calm. "What have you done?" Marissa's polished exterior crumbled under the weight of his gaze. She stumbled over her words, her excuses weak and frantic. The cafe staff, alerted by the commotion, discreetly removed the bowl for testing. Minutes later, the results confirmed Malik's claims. Traces of a toxic substance had been found. The revelation sent shockwaves through the cafe. Bernard's face twisted with betrayal as he stared at the woman he had trusted. Marissa was escorted out, her protests drowned by the murmurs of the crowd. Bernard turned to Malik, his eyes softening as he regarded the boy who had risked everything to save a stranger. "You saved my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you." Malik shrugged, his eyes downcast. "I just did what was right." In that moment, the boy from the streets became an unlikely hero, his courage a beacon in a world that often overlooked him. Bernard, moved by the boy's selflessness, vowed to repay his bravery. Malik's actions not only exposed a hidden danger, but also bridged the divide between two vastly different worlds, proving that even the smallest voices can create ripples of change. The Park Cafe, an enclave of luxury surrounded by towering oaks and vibrant flower beds, was the epitome of urban elegance. Its reputation attracted the city's elite, who dined amidst the gentle clinking of fine china and the soothing murmur of conversation. The sunlight filtered through a lattice of leaves, casting playful patterns on the marble floors. Waiters, clad in immaculate uniforms, glided between tables, their trays laden with gourmet dishes and sparkling glasses of wine. Seated at the cafe's most coveted table was Bernard Green, a man whose name carried weight in business circles. With his silver hair perfectly combed and a tailored suit that exuded wealth, Bernard embodied success. Across from him sat his wife, Marissa, a striking woman with raven black hair and an air of effortless sophistication. Her crimson lips curved into a polite smile, but her eyes remained fixed on her phone, ignoring her husband's attempts at conversation. Outside the cafe's ornate iron fencing, a boy named Malik lingered in the shadows. His worn hoodie hung loosely on his small frame, and his sneakers, scuffed and frayed, bore witness to the countless miles he'd walked. Hunger gnawed at him, an ever-present ache that blurred his focus. Yet, as he watched the cafe's patrons enjoying their meals, he noticed something peculiar at Bernard's table. Marissa, with a practiced nonchalance, withdrew a small vial from her designer handbag. Her movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, as she unscrewed the cap and tilted the vial over Bernard's steaming bowl of soup. A clear liquid trickled out, vanishing into the broth without a trace. Malik's sharp eyes caught the act, and his heart raced. He froze, torn between the urge to intervene and the fear of being dismissed, or worse. Inside, Bernard reached for his spoon, unaware of the silent drama unfolding. Malik's mind screamed at him to act. He took a deep breath, his chest tightening, and stepped through the cafe's entrance. "Don't eat that," he shouted, his voice cracking but loud enough to pierce the cafe's hum. Every head turned toward the boy, the sudden disruption silencing the room. Bernard paused, his spoon midair, and stared at Malik with a mix of confusion and annoyance. Marissa's head snapped up, her composed expression replaced by sharp, calculating alarm. "Who are you?" Bernard asked, his voice steady but tinged with irritation. Malik swallowed hard, his fists clenched at his sides. I saw her," he stammered, nodding toward Marissa. "She put something in your soup." The room erupted in murmurs. Marissa's face hardened and she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He's just some street kid looking for attention. Probably wants money or food." Malik took a step closer to the table, his voice rising with conviction. "I'm not lying. I saw her do it. She doesn't want you to know." Bernard's gaze shifted between Malik and Marissa. His hand hovered over the bowl, doubt creeping into his features. The once lively cafe fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of the boy's words pressing down on everyone. Bernard studied Malik, his sharp eyes searching for signs of deception. "Malik, is it?" Bernard asked, his voice measured. The boy nodded, his dark eyes steady. "Yes, sir. Please don't eat it." Marissa let out a harsh laugh, crossing her arms. "Are you seriously entertaining this nonsense, Bernard?" she said, her tone icy. "Look at him. He probably doesn't even know who you are. Why would you believe him over me?" Bernard didn't respond. Instead, he picked up the spoon, bringing it closer to his face. His hand trembled, not from fear but from the storm brewing inside him. He sniffed the soup, his brows furrowing at the faint but unmistakable chemical scent. Setting the spoon down, he turned to Marissa, his eyes narrowing. "Marissa," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "What's going on here?" Marissa's polished mask cracked, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is insulting," she snapped, her voice rising. "He's lying. You can't seriously think." "Enough!" Bernard cut her off, his voice firm. "You've been acting strange for weeks. Now this..." He gestured to the bowl, his tone razor-sharp. "Tell me the truth." The crowd watched in stunned silence, their meals forgotten. Whispers floated through the air. Did she really do it? She looks nervous. That boy doesn't seem like he's making this up. Marissa's composure unraveled. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, grabbing her handbag. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." Before she could leave, Bernard's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his tone unyielding. "Not until we get to the bottom of this." A waiter stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, should I call the police?" Marissa's face paled, and she shook her head violently. "Don't you dare. This is a misunderstanding." "Yes," Bernard said, his eyes never leaving Marissa's. "Call them." The cafe held its collective breath as the waiter disappeared inside to make the call. Marissa's polished facade shattered completely. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Bernard released her wrist, his expression unreadable. Malik stood a few steps back, his hands trembling. Doubt crept in. What if they didn't believe him? But Bernard turned to him, his voice cutting through the tension. "Malik," he said softly. "Thank you." Moments later, the police arrived. The soup was tested, confirming Malik's claim. Marissa was taken away, her protest drowned by the murmurs of the crowd. Bernard, shaken but grateful, approached Malik. "You saved my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Malik shrugged, his gaze steady. I just did what was right. The boy's courage had not only exposed a hidden threat, but also bridged the gap between two vastly different worlds. In a moment of shared humanity, the line between wealth and poverty blurred, leaving behind a story of bravery and justice that the cafe's patrons would never forget. The aroma of freshly prepared soup filled the bustling cafe, blending with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of utensils. Malik hesitated near the entrance, his heart pounding as he tried to muster the courage to approach the well-dressed couple seated near the window. The boy's clothes were tattered, and his face showed the marks of a hard life, but his determination shone through. Bernard, a man with a commanding presence, sat with his wife Marissa, who exuded an air of poise and control. They were an unlikely picture of wealth and sophistication. Bernard reached for his spoon, preparing to take his first sip of the soup, but a voice cut through the din of the cafe. "Wait, don't eat that." Heads turned as Malik stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. Bernard froze, spoon midair, and turned to face the boy, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. "You can smell it if you don't believe me," Malik insisted, his gaze unwavering. Bernard's expression darkened as he turned to his wife. "Marissa," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "What's going on?" Marissa's eyes widened, but she quickly recovered, waving a dismissive hand. "He's just trying to cause trouble. Look at him. Probably just wants money or food," she said with a sneer, her voice dripping with disdain. The boy's fist clenched as he took a step closer. "I'm not lying," he said, his voice rising. "I saw her. She poured something into the soup when you weren't looking." Bernard's hand hovered over the bowl, doubt flickering across his face. He glanced at his wife, then back at the boy. "You're saying she poisoned my soup?" His voice was heavy with skepticism, but something about Malik's tone made him pause. Marissa scoffed, her polished demeanor starting to crack. "This is absurd. Are you really going to believe some street kid over me?" The cafe grew quiet as patrons leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Bernard studied Malik intently. "What's your name?" "Malik," the boy replied, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "All right, Malik," Bernard said, setting the spoon down. "You're claiming my wife tampered with my soup. Can you prove it?" Malik nodded. "I saw her pour a clear liquid from a small bottle into the bowl. She stirred it quickly while you were looking at your phone." Bernard's face tightened as he turned back to Marissa, who was now visibly flustered. "Is this true?" Marissa crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Of course not. This is ridiculous. He's making it up." But Bernard's gaze didn't waver. Why would he lie? What does he have to gain? The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and Marissa's composure began to unravel. She glared at Malik. "You've been spying on us, haven't you? Trying to cause trouble because you're jealous of people who actually have something." Malik's jaw tightened, but he stood firm. "I'm not jealous," he said. "I couldn't just stand by and let you hurt him." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, and moments later, 2 police officers entered the cafe. The atmosphere grew tense as they approached the table. "What's going on here?" one of them asked, his tone calm but authoritative. Bernard gestured to the bowl. "This boy claims my wife poisoned my soup. I need you to test it." Marissa's face turned crimson. "This is preposterous," she snapped. "He's just a troublemaker." The officer ignored her outburst and leaned down to sniff the bowl cautiously. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Marissa, "do you have anything to say before we proceed?" Marissa hesitated, her hands trembling as she clutched her handbag. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. You want the truth? I'm tired of living in his shadow, tired of his control over everything. He was never supposed to make it past this year." The cafe erupted in gasps. Bernard's face turned pale as the weight of her words sank in. The officer stepped forward, his expression grim. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. Please stand up and put your hands where I can see them." Marissa's composure shattered completely. "You don't understand," she screamed as they secured her hands behind her back. "I deserved everything he had. Everything." As the officers led her away, the cafe patrons watched in stunned silence. Bernard sank back into his chair, his hands trembling as he pushed the bowl away. He looked at Malik, who stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Finally, Bernard spoke, his voice soft but steady. "Malik, sit down." The boy hesitated before slowly taking a seat across from him. Bernard studied him for a long moment. "You saved my life," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Malik shifted uncomfortably. I couldn't let it happen." Bernard nodded, his gaze distant. "You've shown me the truth, about her and about myself. Thank you." The cafe gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the day's events lingered. For Bernard and Malik, it was a moment that would change their lives forever, one rooted in courage, betrayal, and the unshakable power of truth. The cafe's energy had shifted, a quiet hum of conversation gradually returning as patrons processed the dramatic scene that had just unfolded. Malik sat across from Bernard, feeling the weight of the older man's gaze. Bernard's expression softened, his usual air of authority replaced with something closer to gratitude and quiet reflection. "You know," Bernard began, his voice steady but contemplative, "most people would have looked the other way, pretended they didn't see anything, but you didn't. That took courage." "Boy," Malik shrugged, his shoulders tense, his voice barely audible. I don't like seeing people get hurt, that's all." Bernard leaned back in his chair, studying Malik intently. For the first time, he didn't see a scrappy kid from the streets, but someone with depth, someone shaped by a life of struggles. "How long have you been out here?" Bernard asked, his tone gentle but probing. Malik hesitated, glancing away. His voice carried a note of embarrassment. "A while," he admitted. Bernard frowned, but chose not to press further. Instead, he reached into his pocket and retrieved a sleek black phone. "Standing up," he said simply. "Wait here." Malik watched him with growing apprehension. His heart raced. Was Bernard angry? Was he calling someone to get him thrown out? His hands fidgeted with the edge of the table as his mind ran through worst-case scenarios. When Bernard returned, his expression was calm, almost kind. He sat down, placing the phone back in his pocket. "Help is on the way," he said. Malik frowned, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Help?" he asked cautiously. Bernard nodded. "I called someone I trust. They'll make sure you have a place to sleep tonight. Somewhere safe." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to do more than that." The boy's eyes widened in surprise. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly, his voice tinged with defensiveness. "I didn't do this for money or anything." "I know," Bernard said, a faint smile softening his features. "That's why I want to help you. What you did wasn't just brave. It was selfless. If more people were like you, Malik, the world would be a far better place." For the first time in years, Malik felt an unfamiliar warmth rising in his chest. He lowered his gaze, unsure of what to say. The cafe, once filled with tension and accusations, now held a quieter, almost reverent air. Patrons began to trickle out, their expressions thoughtful, as if the events of the day had left a deeper impression on their hearts. Bernard took a sip of water, his movements slow and deliberate. "Sometimes," he said, his voice thoughtful, "life gives us a chance to change someone else's story. You changed mine today, Malik. And maybe, just maybe, I can help change yours." Malik looked up, his dark eyes glistening with a mix of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Relief, gratitude, and a spark of hope. He nodded slowly, unable to find the words to express what this moment meant to him. Outside, the sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the cafe floor. The day was ending, but the weight of what had transpired would linger much longer. Bernard and Malik sat in silence for a while, a quiet understanding passing between them. The lesson of the day wasn't lost on anyone who had witnessed the events. Courage doesn't always wear a suit, and kindness doesn't always come from wealth or power. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in the people we overlook, the ones who have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against them. Malik's bravery had done more than save a life. It had reminded everyone in that cafe, and perhaps everyone who would hear his story, that even the smallest actions can create life-changing ripples. As Bernard placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, the beginnings of a new chapter unfolded, not just for him, but for them both. If the story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of courage, truth, and redemption. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that even the smallest acts of bravery can change lives. Join us next time for more inspiring stories that make an impact